The alarm went off 11 seconds before the shuttle doors were set to open, and I was the only one who understood what it meant. I was standing on the docking platform at Ashkelon Colony, wearing the plain gray uniform of a junior liaison, when the small device clipped under the railing near my feet began to hum. It was not loud. It was barely a whisper of sound, a thin electric note that most people would have mistaken for a faulty light fixture. But I had spent 3 years studying compact security systems, and I knew that hum. It was the sound of a compressed charge waking up. I did not scream. I did not run. I dropped to my knees, ripped the access panel off the railing with my bare hands, and stared at a small black cylinder wired directly into the platform's support beam, 6 feet from where a Vesk diplomatic shuttle was about to land with 40 people inside it. My name is Ellie Marsh, and 12 years ago I gave water to a dying alien in a wheat field. Today, I was about to find out if that single act of kindness was going to get an entire delegation killed. I pressed the comm on my wrist and shouted for the platform to be cleared, but the colony's automated systems had already locked the doors for arrival protocol, and no one outside could hear me over the roar of the shuttle's descending engines. I was alone with a bomb in less than 2 minutes. I want to tell you this calmly, the way people tell stories after the danger has passed, but there was nothing calm about it. My hands were shaking. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. I had trained for diplomacy, not demolition, and yet here I was, staring at wires I only half recognized, knowing that if I guessed wrong, I would not get a second guess. The device had 2 wires, one silver and one copper, both running into a small timer that was counting down from 104 seconds. I recognized the make. It was a colonial mining charge, the kind used to break through rock, not the kind used by any compact engineer. This was not an alien weapon. This was a human one. That fact hit me harder than the ticking clock. Someone from my own colony wanted the Vesk delegation dead. I thought about Thren in that moment, though there was no time to think about anything. I thought about a scout ship crashed in a wheat field when I was 7 years old, about a wounded alien with 3 eyes who told me humanity unsettled his people, because we were unpredictable, because we might be dangerous or might be something entirely new, and no one could tell which. I thought about the report he wrote that bought us 10 years of peace instead of 10 years of war, and I thought, with a strange and sudden clarity, that if I let this charge kill him and everyone on that shuttle, I would be proving every fear the Compact ever had about us. I was not going to let that happen. I pulled the silver wire loose with 2 fingers, my whole body braced for an explosion that did not come. The timer kept counting. 70 seconds. I had guessed wrong, or the wire had not been the trigger at all. I forced myself to breathe. Forced myself to remember every lecture on explosive ordnance I had sat through in diplomatic corps training. Lectures I had taken because I refused to be a liaison who only knew words and treaties, who could not act if the moment ever called for it. The timer was not attached to the wires at all. It was a separate unit, magnetically clamped to the top of the charge, meant to be removed by hand before detonation, not disarmed through the wiring underneath. Someone had built this quickly, and in their hurry, they had left an opening. 40 seconds. I dug my fingers under the edge of the timer unit and pulled. It did not budge. I pulled again, harder, until my knuckles split open against the metal casing, and on the 3rd pull it came free with a sound like a snapping bone. The countdown stopped. The small screen went dark. I knelt there on the platform, blood running down my fingers, breathing like I had just run 5 miles, and the shuttle doors began to open behind me, exactly on schedule, because the automated systems had no idea how close everything had come to ending. The first person off the shuttle was not Thren. It was a younger Vesk soldier, all 4 arms raised in the universal gesture of caution, scanning the platform with fast, sharp movements. He saw me kneeling with a disarmed charge in my hands and made a sound I did not understand, sharp and urgent, and within seconds the whole delegation was moving, not retreating, but forming a tight defensive circle around something at the center of the group. Thren pushed through that circle himself, ignoring the soldier's attempt to stop him, and crouched down in front of me, his 3 eyes moving rapidly between my bleeding hands and the dead device on the ground. "You disarmed this," he said. It was not a question. "There wasn't anyone else to do it," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. He picked up the device and turned it over in 2 of his 4 hands, studying it the way I imagined a physician might study a wound. "This is not compact technology," he said. "This was made by your own people." "I know." "Then someone within your colony wished this delegation to die on the ground before we ever spoke a single word to one another." His middle eye fixed on me. "And you chose, in the space of 100 seconds, to prevent that." I did not answer right away, because the truth was more complicated than a simple choice, and I did not yet have words for it. Around us, colony security had finally broken through the automated lockdown, and were pouring onto the platform, shouting orders, sealing exits, too late to matter for anything except the arrest that would come afterward. I learned later that the device had been planted by a small group calling themselves the Human First Assembly, 3 men and 1 woman, who believed that any peace with the Vest Compact was a surrender, that the only safe alien was a dead one, and that killing this delegation would force the colony into a war they were certain humanity could win. They were wrong about almost everything, but they were right about one thing. If that bomb had gone off, there would have been a war, not because the Vesk wanted one, but because grief and fear rarely wait for facts before they demand blood. I stood up, finally, my legs unsteady beneath me, and looked at Thren properly for the first time since the doors had opened. He looked exactly as he had 12 years earlier in that wheat field, except now there was no blood on his skin and no fear in his eyes, only a kind of stunned attention, as though he was recalculating something in real time. 12 years ago, I said, you told me you did not know if we would meet again. You said your people did not know if I was dangerous or if I was something you had no word for yet. I remember, he said. I think I just answered the question. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Colony security was still shouting behind us. Medics were arriving to look at my hands, and somewhere in the chaos I could hear my supervisor demanding to know how a junior liaison had ended up disarming an explosive device meant for a foreign delegation. None of it mattered as much as the silence between me and Thren in that moment. A silence that stretched back across an entire decade. When I filed my report after Ashkelon, he said quietly, I wrote that a child who offers water to a dying stranger cannot be safely dismissed as either harmless or hostile. I wrote that such a species must be met with equal caution and equal respect, because we could not predict which impulse would win in a crisis, kindness or fear. He paused, and something in his posture shifted, something almost like humility. I did not expect the answer to arrive 12 years later in the form of you, kneeling over a live charge, choosing to save my life and the lives of my people at the risk of your own. I didn't do it just for you, I said, because it was true, and I wanted him to know it. I did it because I meant what I said when I requested this transfer. I don't want to be remembered as the little girl who got lucky in a wheat field. I want every decision from here forward to be one I made on purpose, with my eyes open, knowing exactly what it costs. Security finally reached us, along with 2 medics who insisted on wrapping my hands despite my protests that I was fine. Thren stood beside me through all of it, refusing to let his own delegation retreat back onto the shuttle until he was certain I was safe, which struck several of the colony officials as either deeply strange or deeply significant, depending on how much history with the Vesk they actually understood. It took hours to process everything. The 4 members of the Human First Assembly were found within the day, hiding in an old grain depot on the edge of the colony, and they did not resist when security took them into custody, as though some part of them had already accepted that their plan had failed the moment the countdown stopped. I did not feel triumphant when I heard they were caught. I felt tired and a little sick, because it is one thing to fight an alien threat and another thing entirely to learn that the danger came from your own neighbors. That evening, once the platform had been cleared and the delegation had finally been allowed to proceed to the meeting hall under heavy guard, Thren found me sitting alone on the same low wall where I used to sit as a child, watching the wheat fields turn gold in the fading light. You could have simply reported the device and stepped back, he said, settling down beside me with the slow, careful movement his species always used around unfamiliar furniture. Colony protocol would not have faulted you for retreating. Colony protocol wasn't going to save your life in 90 seconds, I said. I was. Why? I thought about it honestly before I answered. Because he deserved an honest answer and not a rehearsed one. Because 12 years ago I made a decision without understanding what it meant. I was 7. I just saw someone hurting and I helped. But today I understood exactly what was at stake, and I made the same decision anyway, on purpose, as an adult, knowing it might cost me my hands, or worse. That's the difference. That's the whole difference. Thren was quiet for a long moment, watching the wind move through the wheat the same way it had moved 12 years earlier, the night his ship went down in that very field. Then I believe my report was correct, he said finally, and I believe the Compact will finally understand what I have been trying to explain to them for 12 years. Your people are not something to fear from a distance, and you are not simple cattle to be herded or dismissed. You are something we did not have a word for, until now. And what word is that? I asked. He turned to look at me, all 3 eyes steady and calm for the first time since the shuttle doors had opened. Friend, he said. I believe the word is friend. We sat there together as the sun went down over Ashkelon Colony, over the same wheat field where a wounded stranger once told a child that her kindness might one day decide the fate of two worlds. I did not know yet everything that would follow: the treaties, the councils, the long, slow work of building trust between two species who had once looked at each other with nothing but suspicion. But I knew, sitting there with my bandaged hands and my racing heart finally slowing, that the decision I had made that day was the truest one of my life, and that I would make it again, without hesitation, every single time.